Hello friends, Paper Historian here. I'm glad to welcome you to my channel, where we don't just list dates, we crawl into the alleys, kitchens and bathhouses of the past to see how people actually lived. Tonight we're stepping into the Middle Ages, but not into a world of knights shining in spotless armour. We're stepping into a world where water was as much a threat as a cure, where linen shirts worked harder than soap, and where perfume could count as armour. You'll walk the muddy lanes of a town, smell the smoke and the dung, hear the sermons warning you that too many baths will let disease slip into your pores. You'll see peasants beating shirts against river stones, monks washing hands in cloisters, nobles hiding behind silk and rosewater, and physicians arguing endlessly about whether dirt protects or poisons. For centuries, clean meant something very different than it does for us. Less about sparkling tiles and more about survival, balance, and appearances. So settle in, because tonight we're not just telling the story of medieval hygiene, we're going to live it. One splash from a wooden bucket, one comb through hair thick with lice, one perfumed handkerchief pressed against the stink of the street at a time. You wake before the bell and your nose knows the hour as surely as any sundial. Smoke, sour ale rushes damp with yesterday's spillings, the tannery's breath wafting up the lane. This is morning in a medieval town, and you wash with what the street permits. A bucket sits by the door because water lives in the well 2 alleys away, and every drop climbs by arm and rope. You splash your face, rub the grit at the corners of your eyes, wet fingers and smooth the night from your hair. It is washing enough to be presentable and enough to remind you that in this world, clean is a verb with many tenses, only one of which includes a bath. You don't avoid bathing because you enjoy dirt. You avoid it because the town conspires against the habit. Water is labour, carried, paid for, argued over. Fuel is dear. A hot bath is a small bonfire that someone must feed. The Roman pipes that once sang beneath the streets are long quiet. Their stone tubs are broken into thresholds and pig troughs. You live in a house with a hearth, not a furnace. And when firewood becomes a coin, you can burn. You save it for porridge. Even nobles ration heat in winter. The bath, when it appears, is a wooden tub wedged into a room, a kettle steaming, a stool to sit on while someone pours. It is a production, and productions require reasons. Illness, childbed, high feast, a feast day deserving more comfort than usual. You do not climb into such a tub on a Tuesday because the town believes, and sometimes you do too, that water is less medicine than risk. Physicians repeat what their masters in Montpellier and Salerno teach them. The body is a house of humours, and pores are doors and windows. A hot bath flings the shutters wide. If the air outside is foul, miasmatic, heavy with unseen corruption, a newly opened skin will drink illness like wine. In summer, a bath can cool. In winter, it can kill. Ask any mother who has watched a child shiver after being scrubbed too vigorously, or any merchant who stayed too long in a steamy bathhouse and came home shaking with fever 2 days later. You are less superstitious than your grandfather and more cautious than your son will be. You wash the parts that speak to the world, face, hands, without inviting the world in. Your true laundry is linen. You change your shirt more often than scholars suppose, because your shirt, worn next to skin, is a sieve that catches sweat and holds smell. You beat it on stones at the river with the other shirts and chemises, or, if your purse is fat, you send it to a washerwoman who scrubbed her hands thin a long time ago. You hang it in the wind, and it drinks the sun, and when you put it back on, it lifts the town's odour a little from your day. The wealthy multiply shirts and call it cleanliness. The poor call the sun their laundress and the wind their soap. You care for yourself in pieces. At table, you wash hands before and after, because your knife belongs to you and your fingers to the meat you share, and hands are the first ambassadors of civility. You rinse from a common ewer and wipe on a towel that has more stories than stains. Your nails are tools. You clean them with the tip of your knife when you sit in a doorway and watch the street. You keep a comb of bone or wood and you pass it through your hair by the window light. When lice fall, you crack them with your fingernail and curse them as if they could understand. On feast days, you sprinkle rose water on your wrists if you have it, vinegar if you do not. Your mouth you rub with a cloth wrapped around your finger. If you can afford it, you use a powder of salt, sage, or finely ground charcoal. Your breath is the smell of your diet, onion, garlic, ale, identical to the breath of everyone around you, so you are forgiven. Bathing does exist, and where it lives you go when you can. In the north, there are sweat houses and steam huts that descend from older customs. Scandinavians and Rus love the heat and the plunge, and if you travel with merchants up the Baltic, you will be shocked to see families sweating together, flogging each other with birch boughs, laughing as if steam were a saint. In the Empire's cities, you may find a bargestuber, a bathhouse that heats water in copper kettles, fills tubs in cubicles with curtains, and serves food between courses of hot and cold. In Italy and France, the stews sit by rivers, and if you believe the moralists, every tub is antechamber to a bed. They are not wrong about the bed. Many bathhouses discovered long ago that steam pairs well with bodies, but the bath came before the bed. For a few hours a week, a craftsman can sweat his joints loose, soak the black from his nails, play chess on a wet bench with someone whose name he barely knows. It is a kind of communion, and you pay for it like you pay for ale, gladly. The clergy scold, as clergy will. After the first flights of plague, when every crowd feels dangerous, preachers condemn the bathhouse as a nest of contagion and vice. They are not entirely wrong. When the air in a city is stale and the sewers are gullies that run only when it rains, crowding naked in steam is an experiment you conduct with your health. Municipal councils, practical to the core, close the baths during outbreaks and open them when memory has scabbed over. Physicians argue in their Latin, heat opens pores, pores accept the bad air. Therefore, avoid baths during epidemics. A century later, physicians argue again, dirt breeds corruption, therefore wash more. You are caught between theories, and so you do what your grandmother did. You wash enough not to be naked to illness, and not so much that illness can climb into you. The monastery is its own climate. If you are tonsured, you know the rule of cleanliness is prayer with water. Hands often, feet weekly, full baths when the calendar so grants. A monk washes out of respect for the work he must do, and the brothers he must sit beside inquire. He does not soak for pleasure. He may run a hostel that keeps a bath for pilgrims, a charity that pours water on people who have walked too far for pride. He instructs novices that purity of skin is not purity of soul, and yet he insists that the kitchen staff keep their hair trimmed and their aprons clean. Even a saint hates grease in the soup. You live with smells, and you sort them into categories that no modern nose can quite understand. The street smells like work and waste. Your house smells of smoke and stew. The church smells of wax and cold stone. The apothecary smells of camphor, cinnamon if his supply ship came in, and always a thread of vinegar that cuts through everything like a bell. Bad smells are not just aesthetic offense. They are warnings, signs that rot has set in, and that invisible agents might ride on the air. You do not know microbes, but you know wind. You sweeten the air with herbs hung over your door, with juniper burned on coals, with a leaf of mint crushed between fingers. When someone coughs hard in winter, you wash the floor with vinegar because everyone agrees it helps. It helps. Seasons order your habits. In spring, when meltwater swells streams and the river runs grey, you shovel out the privy, scrub the bench where the family sits, and lay fresh straw on the floor. In summer, you beat blankets and hang them in the sun, where moths die and fleas jump out and drown in a basin. In autumn, you wash barrels and scald them to receive apples, to make cider or keep grain dry. In winter, you wash less, because heat is a treasure, and a tub is a luxury, and you content yourself with linen, with rubbing, with snow rubbed on a red face when you come in from the woodpile. Your body cycles like the fields. Cleanliness is a harvest, not a tap. If you are rich, water flows toward you. Servants carry it, heat it, pour it over you in a chamber that can be made private. You own basins of bronze with rims so finely hammered they ring, towels of linen with borders your wife embroidered, soap scented with bay. You bathe when you wish and call it virtue. You prefer to be perfumed not because you are vain, but because a perfumed lord makes his presence known as he enters a hall and takes the center of it. If you are poor, your smell introduces you too. It says you have worked. In a world where most work is honest, this is pardoned. When strangers from other worlds pass through, they rearrange your measurements. If you're in the Crusader states, you see how carefully Muslims wash before prayer, how their bathhouses are institutions, not indulgences. You bring home envy tinged with memoir. If you are a merchant on the Via Egnatia, you might meet a Greek who smells of rosewater at noon and of smoke at dusk, and you tell your wife this is civilization. She tells you to fetch more water. You and your neighbors do not think you're filthy, you think you're prudent. You manage scarcity, balance belief and experience, and shape a cleanliness fitted to town and purse. A bather too fond of tubs is thought ill as often as admired. He will catch a fever, and a man contemptuous of washing finds himself eating alone. There is a mean, and you keep to it because cultures survive on means more than extremes. Your descendants will judge you, they will build fountains indoors. They will make clean a moral more than a habit and call you dirty. They will not see the kettle, the woodpile, the rope into the well, the cold room with a tub in a draught, the night sweats of a child you cooled with a damp cloth, the shirt you beat against the river stone until your arms shook and then wore, smiling because it smelled like wind. If you live in the city, you learn tricks that are almost as good as baths. You avoid the tanner's quarter after noon. You carry a nosegay when you must pass a midden in summer. You keep your boots greased against filth and rub them down with vinegar once a week. You leave your cloak by the door because it collects the street like a canvas collects paint. You teach your children to wash their hands after the privy and before the loaf and to rinse their cups between ales. You are not a chemist, you are a citizen. Hygiene is not a hobby, it is survival made daily. And so you live with water at your own pace, poured from a jug over your hands, wiped along your wrists, splashed on your face, soaked into your shirt on wash day, steamed in a bathhouse on a rare afternoon when the town seems to exhale with you. You do not measure yourself against Rome's baths or your great-grandchildren's pipes because neither exists for you. You measure against the man in the doorframe across the lane, who rubs his neck with a wet cloth as you do yours and smells of the same stew. You are not unwashed, you are washed enough. In your world, that is a virtue disguised as economy. You rise with the frost, stiffen your beard, and your first act is not to bathe, but to break the ice in the bucket. The Middle Ages did not confuse cold with cleanliness, and winter is the cruelest teacher of that truth. To heat enough water for a bath means cutting, hauling, and burning wood that you may need more urgently for your hearth. So you rub your face with snow until it burns, scrape your teeth with a cloth dipped in salt, and pull on a shirt that was beaten against stones by the river in summer, and has waited folded in a chest since then. It smells faintly of lavender if your wife tucked herbs between the folds. Otherwise, it smells of cedar shavings and the dry patience of storage. The seasons decide more about your hygiene than choice does. In spring, you clean because the thaw exposes everything hidden in snow. The street is muck, the privy reeks, and suddenly, everyone is beating rugs, airing blankets, pouring buckets of grey water down steps. You dig out the cesspit before it floods, scatter lime if you can afford it, and lay fresh rushes on the floor to soak the spills of daily life. Summer is the most generous. Rivers run clean enough to bathe in if you are young or reckless. Washerwomen stand knee-deep in the shallows, slapping cloth against stones, gossiping as loudly as they scrub. Autumn is a time of preparation, when barrels are scalded to hold cider or salted meat, Pots are scrubbed with ash, and you mend boots before mud season. Winter is austerity, when water freezes solid and cleanliness shrinks to wiping hands, changing linen, and surviving. The town itself has rhythms of hygiene. Wells are tested and sometimes forbidden if disease stalks the neighborhood. Carriers haul barrels of water for a fee, and you curse the cost but pay, because without water, even the smallest acts of washing die. The bathhouses, when they exist, are not only for cleaning, they are for meeting, eating, even playing games while steam rises. Some are family places where couples sit in tubs and share meals. Others are notorious stews where pleasure follows the wash. Preachers thunder against them. Councils close them during plague years. But when they reopen, you return, because nothing else soaks fatigue out of bone. Your body carries its own timetable. Hands must be washed before eating because knives are few and bread is shared. Feet are washed weekly if you are lucky, more often in monasteries where rules demand it. Hair is combed daily if lice are not to conquer you. Combs are bone, wood, or metal, and the cracking of lice between thumbnails is as familiar as the cracking of nuts by the hearth. Teeth are wiped with cloth, sometimes rubbed with sage or salt, rarely with powders of chalk or charcoal if an apothecary has them. Breath is everyone's problem, so everyone forgives. Clothing is your shield against dirt, and so laundry is your real bath. The wealthy own multiple shifts and change often. The poor have one or two and beat them clean when they can. Linen is prized because it absorbs sweat and can be washed more harshly than wool. Changing into fresh linen is praised in poems and sermons as a sign of decency, almost a sacrament. Soap exists, made from lion fat, but it is harsh and used sparingly. Ashes serve almost as well. Sunlight and wind are the cheapest cleansers. You hang the cloth and let the sky do its work. Travel teaches you comparisons. If you are a crusader, you see Muslims wash 5 times a day before prayer, their ablutions as regular as bells, and you come home with envy mixed with suspicion. If you're a merchant in Novgorod, you discover steam baths where men flog themselves with birch branches and plunge into snow, and you write about it with disbelief. If you are Italian, you boast of perfumed oils. If you're English, you boast of cold water and hearty neglect. Every people believes its own habits are sensible and others excessive. Illness sharpens the debate. When plague comes, physicians warn that bathing opens pores and lets disease seep in. Better, they say, to keep skin sealed with dirt than to invite death through clean pores. You obey reluctantly. Vinegar washes replace water. Herbs are burned to sweeten the air. Some go to extremes, wearing the same clothes for months, believing filth a barrier. Later, when the crisis passes, voices rise in favor of washing again, and you obey that too. Medicine is argument, and your body is the field where arguments leave scars. Religion plays its part. Monasteries regulate washing carefully, hands often, feet on Fridays, baths permitted on feast days or when illness demands. Pilgrims are washed as charity. Priests remind you that cleanliness of soul matters more than skin, but they also scold if you come to Mass foul enough to distract neighbours. The ritual of holy water at the church door is both spiritual and practical. You wet your fingers, trace the cross, and wipe away at least a fraction of dust. To live in the Middle Ages is to live with smell, and you sort smells like vocabulary. Smoke means warmth and life. Ale means plenty. The reek of dung is tolerated, but the sweet rotten stench of carrion means danger. Perfume is not frivolous, it is defence. A sprig of rosemary worn at the breast is thought to ward off bad air. Vinegar cloths pressed to the nose in crowded markets keep contagion at bay. You burn juniper in sick rooms, because its smoke is sharper than death's. Hygiene is not only water, but also air, not only body, but also environment. You do not think yourself filthy, you think yourself prudent. You wash as often as circumstances allow, you scent the air as medicine, you launder your linen because it is your second skin. You are not ignorant, you are pragmatic. You live in a world where every act of cleanliness costs effort, fuel, and time, and you balance those costs against the risk of cold, the threat of disease, and the demands of labor. Your descendants will laugh at your restraint, but they will not understand your world. You will never have their pipes and taps, but they will never have your patience. You live outside the city walls, where the smells are sharper and the water is closer. The village is smaller than the market quarter of a town, but its rhythm is older, shaped by the field, the well, and the animals that crowd the yard. Hygiene here is not luxury, but survival, though you would not call it by that word. You call it chores. Every day begins with mucking out stalls, scattering straw, fetching water. If the street in town was foul with tannery runoff and alehouse spillage, the village lane is foul with pigs rooting, chickens scratching, and dung heaps that steam in the sun. You walk through it without flinching, because it is your compost and your wealth as much as your stench. Washing is as regular as the well permits. You draw buckets for animals first, for cooking second, and only then for yourself. A face is splashed, hands are rubbed before meals, feet are rinsed if they have trudged too long through mud. Full immersion is rare and usually accidental. A tumble into a mill pond, a cooling swim after haymaking, or a religious ritual at Easter when some priests encourage bathing to honor resurrection. Soap is scarce, harsh, and often made at home from lye and animal fat. More often you use sand or ashes to scour hands, or a fistful of grass to wipe them clean before eating. Your real defense against filth is linen. A shirt that clings close to the body soaks up sweat, and washing that shirt in the stream once a week is as close to a bath as many peasants know. Women's chemises serve the same purpose, worn day and night, beaten against stones when the weather allows, and hung over hedges to dry in the wind. Changing into fresh linen is both comfort and pride, proof that the household is in order. Sermons praise the practice, saying that clean linen is a sign of virtue, though the sermons do not mention how hard it is to keep linen white in a world of mud. The house itself must be managed. The floor is dirt or rough boards, covered with rushes that are replaced when they rot or stink. Herbs are mixed into the rushes. Sweet flag, lavender, mint, both for their smell and for their power to repel fleas. Smoke from the hearth hangs in the rafters, blackening beams but also driving out insects. The privy, if one exists, is a pit behind the barn, and children are warned to watch their step at night. Chamber pots are emptied onto middens that double as fertilizer piles. A visitor from a later age would gag, but you do not. You live in balance with what you produce, and the line between filth and resource is thinner than they will ever understand. Animals complicate everything. Dogs track mud into the house, cats leave fleas in the straw bed, cows brush against you with hides caked in manure. You clean yourself because of them as much as because of other people. Combing hair is daily necessity. Cracking lice between thumbnails a common ritual. Children scratch until they bleed. Mothers boil combs in water when they can. Flea bites are as common as freckles. A smoky fire, pungent herbs hung from beams, and regular shaking of bedding keep infestations tolerable rather than absent. You do not imagine a life without them. Festivals bring a burst of washing. Before Easter and Christmas, whole households scrub benches, sweep yards, and wash bodies in cold water if they can bear it. The church expects some outward sign of inward renewal, and you provide it with clean clothes, trimmed hair, and children's faces rubbed until they shine. Weddings and christenings are other occasions when families put forward their best version of cleanliness. A bride's chemise must be spotless, her hair combed smooth, her hands scented with herbs. Guests notice, and reputation depends on it. Hygiene here is social as much as medical. Medicine reaches you slowly, but its advice still shapes habits. Local healers tell you that bad air carries sickness, and you fight it with whatever you can. Burning juniper or rosemary in sick rooms, splashing vinegar on floors, pressing cloths soaked in herbs to faces during plague scares. Washing in rivers during outbreaks is discouraged by those who fear that disease swims in water. Others insist washing is the cure. You try both, depending on which neighbour you trust. Experience teaches you that some fevers burn through no matter what you do. Children are taught early the small routines. Wash your hands before bread, comb your hair before Mass, change your shirt on Sundays if you have a spare. They learn not because they understand disease, but because these acts distinguish decency from sloth. A child who arrives dirty to church is whispered about. A child with filthy nails is scolded by the priest. Cleanliness is virtue, and virtue is survival in a community where reputation can mean the difference between help in famine and hunger alone. From the outside, your world seems foul. From the inside, it is managed. You do not aim to be spotless, you aim to be acceptable. Dirt on boots is honest, soot on hands is expected, sweat is forgiven. The real shame is stench that lingers too long, hair matted, clothes soiled beyond care. That signals not poverty, but neglect, and neglect is close to sin. You know how far to go. Not too little, not too much, just enough to live among your neighbours without offending God or man. And so hygiene in the countryside is an art of limits. You wash where it matters, face, hands, linen. You freshen with herbs, smoke, and sun. You treat filth as both enemy and ally, manure as both stench and seed. You raise children to repeat the same acts you learned, and they in turn will raise theirs. It is not ignorance. It is balance, struck daily between effort and necessity. And in that balance, you believe yourself clean enough. You step into a palace and expect to find it fragrant, tiled, and awash with scented water. Instead, you discover corridors smelling of wax, kitchens thick with grease, courtyards where horses leave their calling cards, and chambers where noblemen and women conduct their lives in layers of silk rather than layers of soap. Cleanliness at court is not absence of dirt. It is the presence of perfume, linen, and display. To be noble is not to bathe more often than peasants, but to redefine what clean means. A prince begins his morning not with a plunge into water, but with the lever, the ritual rising. Servants bring warm cloths soaked in scented water and wipe his face and hands. They change his linen shirt, perhaps twice in a day, so that sweat never lingers long enough to betray him. The shirt is his invisible bath, fresh, white, and smelling faintly of lavender or musk. His doublet and hose go over it, heavy and rich. He feels respectable, not because he is scrubbed to the skin, but because the linen against him is spotless. The nobility of Europe measure hygiene in textiles more than tubs. Bathing does happen, but it is rare and deliberate. When a queen bathes, a copper tub is hauled into her chamber, filled with buckets of hot water carried by servants and laced with herbs, rosemary, chamomile, sometimes milk. Screens are set up, musicians may play to make the moment more dignified, and physicians may hover to remind her not to soak too long. Too many baths, they warn, weaken the body, open the pores, and invite sickness. Even monarchs heed these cautions. Henry IV of France was rumoured to have bathed only a handful of times in his life, relying instead on a change of clothes and liberal dousing with perfume. Perfume is not mere luxury, it is armour. Nobles layer themselves in it, sometimes so heavily that visitors complain of the fog. Scents of rose, amber, musk, or citrus cover the odours of bodies, kitchens, and crowded halls. They also signal wealth. To smell of civet or imported spices is to declare that you command trade routes and purses beyond the reach of commoners. At court, fragrance is proof of status, and to reek of sweat is to reek of poverty. The architecture of palaces does little to aid hygiene. Versailles gleams with mirrors and gold, but is notorious for its stench. Courtiers relieve themselves behind staircases, in gardens, or in portable pots emptied too seldom. Rushes and tapestries absorb odours. Air grows thick with candles, people and animals. Servants sprinkle herbs, burn incense, or wave pomanders filled with cloves and cinnamon. Cleanliness becomes a battle of cover and distraction rather than eradication. The courtier's handkerchief, scented and held to the nose, is as much a weapon as a garment. Hair is another marker. Noblemen powder wigs until they glow white. Noble women pile hair high, dusting it with flour and dressing it with pomades that quickly turn rancid. Lice infestations are common, but scratching is hidden behind elegance. Combs and servants work tirelessly to keep appearances intact. Teeth fare no better. Sweet wines and sugar rot them, so nobles rub their gums with powders of burnt bread, crushed pearls, or herbs. A smile is bright only by candlelight. Yet nobles are not indifferent. They cultivate rituals of washing that are shorter but more frequent, rinsing hands before meals, washing face with scented water, wiping with cloth soaked in vinegar during plague seasons. Kings employ surgeons and physicians to oversee their routines. Monasteries and town baths remain available, though often shunned as too public or too risky. Nobility prize privacy above immersion. A discreet basin and a towel are preferable to a communal tub. When foreign envoys arrive, hygiene becomes diplomacy. French courtiers mock the English for being boorish and unwashed. English visitors complain that the French drown in perfume rather than water. Venetian travellers praise Ottoman bathhouses and return home astonished at their magnificence. Comparison is constant, and every court defines its cleanliness against the habits of others. The irony is sharp. Peasants scrub linen in rivers, and peasants' wives beat shirts against stones weekly, while kings change clothes and call it virtue. In both cases, linen is the mediator. The nobility may not wash more often, but they conceal it more effectively. Wealth lets them redefine hygiene as presentation rather than practice. You stand in a hall glittering with chandeliers and see men who have not washed in months but who smell of rosewater and cinnamon. You see women in gowns heavy with jewels who scratch discreetly at lice under their wigs. You see servants carrying bowls of herbs to scatter on floors. You see handkerchiefs dabbed with vinegar pressed to noble noses during plague season. You see a world that values the appearance of cleanliness more than its reality. And yet, from their perspective, they are clean. They are adorned, perfumed, robed in linen, and separated from the grime of labour. Hygiene at court is about hierarchy. To be noble is to be above filth. Even if that filth seeps under doors, up stairwells, into chambers, they believe they have conquered it with silk and scent. You, standing in their midst, may doubt it, but you cannot deny the power of appearances. In the Middle Ages and beyond, cleanliness at court is as much theatre as it is practice, and the actors believe their roles. You wake in a century when whispers of soap and water begin to carry more weight than prayers and perfume. By the late Middle Ages and the dawn of the early modern world, the idea of hygiene is shifting under your feet. Plague has taught brutal lessons, that filth can kill as surely as famine, that contagion is not only punishment from God, but a thing that lurks in the air and clings to bodies. Physicians argue still, but their tone has changed. Some say dirt shields you, others say it poisons you. You, standing between, begin to experiment. In cities, municipal councils take cautious steps. Wells are inspected more often, fines levied against those who dump waste too close. Streets are swept on feast days, gutters are dug to channel rain. Rakers haul night soil beyond the walls where farmers buy it for fertilizer. It does not smell cleaner, but it smells more managed. Civic pride grows in paving, in fountains that offer both drinking water and symbols of order. Clean water becomes not just necessity, but ornament, celebrated in sculptures of lions spouting streams. Inside homes, new habits creep in. Soap, once harsh and rare, becomes softer with the addition of olive oil or imported lye. Merchants sell cakes stamped with seals, perfumed for those who can pay. Women wash their hair with rosemary water, men rinse with vinegar after shaving. The wealthy bathe more often, sometimes weekly, sometimes even daily in great wooden tubs. They surround the act with music, servants, food, turning it into ceremony. Manuals of etiquette now praise those who smell fresh, who keep nails trimmed, who comb hair smooth. Cleanliness begins to move from suspicion to virtue. Religion, too, softens. Monks still warn against vanity, but they also write about the importance of moderation. Too much dirt is sloth, too much bathing is luxury. The golden mean is praised. Wash enough to honor your body as God's creation. Avoid excess that leads to pride. Pilgrimages to holy springs and healing baths combine devotion with cleansing. Water, once feared as a highway for disease, regains some of its older sacramental power. Medicine advances slowly, but it advances. Anatomists open bodies and see with their own eyes what humors cannot explain. Early chemists experiment with distillation, creating tinctures that clean wounds better than charms. Surgeons wash hands, sometimes instinctively, before cutting. Observers note that soldiers who bathe fare better in camp than those who do not. Theories lag, but practice begins to point in a new direction. Travel opens eyes further. Crusaders and later merchants have long remarked on Muslim ablutions, envying the discipline of washing before prayer. Renaissance envoys in Constantinople describe splendid hammams where steam, massage and cold plunges are woven into daily life. Travelers in Russia marvel at wooden steam huts, brutal but cleansing. The comparison is unavoidable. Europeans begin to see themselves as less clean, and pride bruises into reform. By the 16th century, fashions turn again. Bathhouses, once shuttered by plague fears, reopen and thrive in some cities. Public baths are advertised as places of health, where doctors recommend sweating out impurities. Perfume remains armor, but it no longer hides an absolute refusal of water. To smell of roses and to appear freshly washed becomes the mark of refinement. Writers speak of hygiene, though not in our sense. They mean harmony between body and environment, maintained by washing, fresh air and moderation in diet. You notice it in small things. Children are scolded for dirty nails, not only for sinful behavior. A husband compliments his wife on her fresh linen, not only her dowry. Apprentices in guilds are required to wash before presenting themselves at work. Sermons include advice on keeping bodies pure as a reflection of souls. Cleanliness, once precarious and debated, slides slowly into morality. To be unwashed is no longer only risky, it is shameful. The irony is that the Middle Ages were never as filthy as later centuries mocked, nor the Renaissance as spotless as it boasted. People always washed, just differently, by different measures and with different fears. What changes is the meaning. In earlier centuries, water is danger as much as comfort. Perfume is shield as much as vanity. Linen is bath as much as garment. In later centuries, water becomes cure, perfume becomes embellishment, linen becomes supplement. The balance tips. And you, standing at the edge of these centuries, feel the shift in your own habits. You bathe a little more, you scrub your teeth with powders a little more often, you expect your children to be cleaner than you were. You no longer accept the stink of streets as destiny. You hope for fountains, for sewers, for drains that carry filth away instead of leaving it at your door. Cleanliness becomes part of your dream of a better world, a world that your descendants will one day inherit with pipes, soap, and science. They will look back and call you dirty. They will exaggerate your neglect, laugh at your perfumes, and cringe at your rush-strewn floors. They will not see your careful balance, your daily rinsing of hands, your weekly beating of linen, your cautious fear of water during plague. But you know better. You know that hygiene in your age was not absence, but adaptation. You did what was possible with the knowledge and tools at hand, and you survived. That, more than anything, is the true definition of cleanliness in the Middle Ages. Settle in and get comfortable, because our next story will explore the daily life of a young Spartan. the way they are raised and trained, as well as the realities of that era. You are born without your own name, at least not one that will matter unless other men decide you deserve it. The first word that belongs to you is not son, but fit. The women of your house labour, the midwife ties and cuts, and before the honeyed cloth has cooled on your lips, you are carried out from the dim room into daylight and judgment. In another city, a father would lift you himself and call you his. In Sparta, you are given to men who wear red and smell of leather and smoke, and they look you over the way farmers look over colts. They check your limbs, your spine, your breath, and whether you grip a finger with a will that can be sharpened. If you are frail, if your legs crook like reeds, if your cry is weak, the decision is brief. The slope of Taygetus is steep and indifferent. Sparta begins with subtraction. You survive the first arithmetic. You sleep swaddled in wool that scratches and teaches. The women sing to you in a rhythm meant to match marching feet. Your mother's hands are rough. They do not hover. When you cry too long, you taste wine mixed into water. Men say it hardens you, makes you sleep, discourages weakness. In other cities, they call such dosing cruel. In Sparta, they call it prudent. All softness is rationed here, including pity. Your first toy is not a rattle, but a reed cut smooth, light enough to hold, straight enough to point. Your first stories are not about lovers and tricksters, but about Heracles, about men who stood in a line and did not break. When you are 7, they take you. The day is not chosen to spare you. It is chosen to remind your mother that you are not hers alone. The state is a father with more hands. An older boy, 12 perhaps, collects you with others and leads you to the common dining hall to eat. For the first time, bread that tastes of imaginations, you will not be allowed. The agoge begins. It is not a school in the way Athenians understand it. No one will teach you music beyond what makes feet keep time. No one will teach you letters beyond what lets you read orders. You will learn to speak in short words that cut, and to hold your eyes level with men who can kill you by accident. You will sleep on pallets you weave from reeds you cut from the Eurotas, and if your back itches, it means you left the spearheads on and did not cut smooth enough. You will be flogged for sloppiness. You will not be comforted for pain. Hunger is your first textbook. They feed you on purpose too little. You are expected to steal, and you are punished not for theft, but for clumsiness. You learn that appetite is not an enemy if harnessed. You learn to read kitchens and shadows. You learn which steward drinks too much watered wine to guard well. When they catch you with a stolen cheese, they lay the lash across your back until you understand that the knife you carry has 2 edges. Hunger teaches you to move without being seen. Pain teaches you to keep still. Men who will one day lock shields with you stand behind you while you flinch, and you learn to stop flinching. Shame is a cold bath. In time it becomes a lake. Cold is the second lesson. They deny you sandals in winter and tell you to harden your feet. Your cloak, one piece, red, is the only warmth you will carry through seasons, and you will learn how to wrap it without looking like an old woman. You watch your breath as if it were an enemy creeping in twigs. When frost cracks under your step, you remember the word fit and know it is still being decided. The older boys call you. They set you tasks that skirt cruelty without always avoiding it. A hidden hierarchy rules the dormitory. You obey the Iren, the boy of 20 who drills you, insults you, makes you race a river you cannot cross. You do not hate him, or you do and hide it, because tomorrow he may be your tent mate in a border fight you cannot imagine yet. The boy who defies him goes hungry. The boy who pleases him learns the rhythm of command. Pain is public in Sparta. The festival of Artemis Orthia is a drill lined with spectators. They pile cheeses on the altar and set the younger boys to snatch them, while older ones wield whips. You run forward with the others and feel leather open your skin in little commas. You do not cry, or you do and live with the mark of it. Mothers watch and do not weep because glory is a kind of numbness. Foreigners gape and tell each other stories about monsters. You hear their voices and taste iron and want them to shut up. When the priests nod, it ends, and you go wash your back with cold water that smells of the river and sheep, and the sting pleases you in a way you are ashamed to admit. You are becoming what they are making. Speech becomes a craft. The paidonomos, the master of boys, teaches you to answer with sentences that carry as much weight as a spear. A Spartan is expected to be laconic, not because he is dull, but because he economizes. You learn to answer an insult with one word that outlasts it. You learn to listen to men who say very little and do very much. You learn songs that do not decorate but sharpen. You march, chant, until your mind lives where your feet do. Poetry is exercise. The chorus tells of those who stood. You learn breath control standing. When a question can be answered yes with a nod, you nod. Men from Ionia think you are rude. Men from Corinth think you are unlettered. Your own think you are forming. At 12, you sleep outside some nights with only your cloak. The iron sets you hunts you cannot finish. The elders send you to spy on helots, the great unloved majority whose labor lets you pretend that virtue is self-made. You stalk through fields and learn how to disappear into furrows when a farmer turns. You are told that the helot is almost a beast, and you repeat it because it makes your work easier. Later, when a knife in your hand meets flesh that is not a boar's, you do not tremble. The city believes that freedom for the few is anchored in fear for the many. You are the anchor chain they measure. At this age, they give you a mentor, older, chosen, who watches you more closely than fathers watch sons in cities where fathers own their sons. Affection is not forbidden, it is curated. The older youth teaches you how to hold a shield until your shoulder burns, how to run in step so that the line does not tear itself apart, how to ignore flies on your face when you stand guard. He may teach you tenderness too, the kind that in other cities is called vice and in yours is called friendship until you are old enough to marry. Sparta scripts intimacies for utility and calls them traditions. You will learn later how they feel when no one is watching. Your world is boys first, men later, women always there, like a mountain range you have not yet crossed. Spartan women do not hide like Attic women. They run, they shout encouragements that shame men who lag. They own the houses you do not sleep in. They speak as if they could vote, and their sons imitate their voices. A Spartan mother tells her son, with your shield or on it, and you repeat it in your head until the wood feels heavier. They do not tell you stories of love, they tell you stories of shame, which is what passes for love here. When you are 14, a girl laughs because your hair is not yet grown as long as the law requires for men, and you feel heat you cannot name. You know the day will come when your hair, braided and oiled, will mark you among men as ready. You begin to let it grow. At 16, your joints know themselves better than your thoughts do. The Aaron no longer drills you like a pest. He consults you like a younger brother who can be trusted with fire. You bear hunger differently now. Stealing is no longer a game, but a tactical drill. You learn to slip into a neighbor's yard and slice a strip of meat from an animal without waking it, and you are flogged for pride when you boast. Pride is the enemy here, not fear. They kill it daily with insults and revive it yearly with choruses. You love the city because it leaves you no choice. You confuse love with dependency and will for years. At 18, you pass into the herd of older youths, the Mellarines, and the city begins to think of you as a weapon. You drill with the older men, feel the thunk of your shield into a line until the sound feels like certainty. You learn to eat black broth without grimacing, to drink less wine than Athenians and talk less nonsense. You are evaluated by men who have done things you cannot describe and by women who comment as if they had done them. Marriage may come, but it will be a marriage of shadows, secret visits, a wife you see like a raid until you're 30 and earn the right to dine with your family. Until then, you belong to your mess, your secession, your group of 15 men with whom you eat, with whom you will bleed. refuse to join a mess or be rejected by it, and you are a ghost in your own city, alive but without a table. You will not refuse. You learn the hoplites' arts until they replace every earlier lesson, how to hold the shield so that it protects the man on your left more than yourself, how to thrust with a spear underhand so the line stays low and terrible, how to listen for the flute that sets your step, how to feel the earth's give under an enemy's weight, how to close your teeth on your own panic. You learn the phalanx's one truth. You are as good as the man on your left. Courage is communal, cowardice is contagious. Your shame and your honor are functions of geometry. At 20, you know why they starved you, why they beat you, why they stole your name and gave you one that others chant. They needed a line that would not run. They needed sons who thought of themselves as brothers because of hunger and pain, and who thought of the state as mother because their own mothers taught them to. You do not call it propaganda, you call it upbringing. You do not call it indoctrination, you call it law. You will not call it cruelty, you will call it necessity the first time you see fear move across a man's face and then leave because your line did not. You are a Spartan now, and your body is a sentence the city wrote so that it can go on saying we. At 20, you are no longer a child in training, but not yet fully a man. The agoge has wrung softness out of you, left you lean, scarred and restless, but the city is not finished. It throws you into a life that is half soldier, half shadow. You are now among the Irenes, the young warriors who begin to taste responsibility and danger. The elders expect you to live between two worlds, 1 foot in the barracks of youth, 1 foot edging toward the assembly of men. The mess hall is your anchor. The secession, 15 men who eat, drill, and one day will fight together, is the family Sparta has always meant to replace your birth family. You bring contributions of barley, wine, cheese, figs, and a portion of meat from the common herds, because without food, you cannot sit at the table, and without a place at the table, you are nobody. Conversation at the mess is not idle. You listen as older men debate tactics, gossip about helots, or mock soft-living Athenians. Every laugh teaches you who belongs and who risks being shamed. The broth is black, thick with pig's blood, vinegar, and salt. Foreigners gag. You learn to swallow it as if it were pride boiled down to liquid. Nights are not always spent indoors. You are sent on the Crypteia, the hidden campaign. The elders declare that the helots, the enslaved population that tills fields and keeps Sparta fed, are restless. To remind them who holds power, you and others are armed with daggers and sent into the countryside. By day you hide, watching smoke from their hearths. By night you move, killing when ordered or when opportunity rises. Some helots fall because they looked too strong, others because they spoke too boldly. You are told this is training, that it teaches stealth and toughness. You know, in the silence afterward, that it is also terror made flesh. Sparta lives by fear as much as discipline, and you are the instrument of both. Marriage hovers like a rumor. At 20 you may wed, but the wedding is more theft than ceremony. A bride is chosen, her head shaved, her clothes replaced with a man's cloak, and in darkness you visit her by stealth, slipping from the barracks to her chamber. Encounters are quick, secret, and unsentimental. You return to your mess before dawn, laughing with comrades as if you had only gone to steal food. Love is not forbidden, but it is not expected either. The city wants your loyalty fixed on the line, not the bed. Only when you reach 30 will you be allowed to live openly with a wife, to sit at your own hearth without censure. Until then, you are husband second, soldier first. Discipline remains merciless. You spar daily, bruises blooming like badges across your body. Elders watch and shout, mocking hesitation, praising boldness. A spear in your hand is no longer play. Its weight feels natural, the calluses in your palm molded to its shaft. Shields grow heavier with purpose, drilled into your arm until you think of yourself as an edge of a wall. Sword practice is rare. You are told the short blade is for finishing, not for winning. Winning comes from the shield wall, the phalanx that makes every Spartan a brick in a living fortress. Punishments do not end with youth. If you stumble in drill, you are flogged. If you answer a question too long, you are ridiculed. If you shirk chores, the entire mess shames you until you volunteer extra. Shame is Sparta's second army. It fights within as surely as hoplites fight without. Mothers hiss at cowards in the marketplace. Elders banish men from public meals if they disgrace themselves. A Spartan without a mess is a ghost. Better to die in line than to eat alone. Yet pride creeps in despite the design. When you march in festival with long hair oiled and combed, when girls sing choruses that praise bravery and mock cowardice, you feel your chest lift. When foreigners come to gape at your discipline, you walk with measured step, eyes front, the flute piping, shields flashing. You believe the myths about yourself because others believe them too. You're part of a machine, but you're also part of a legend, and legends feed men better than bread. At 25, you are watched for signs of leadership. The city wants to know who among your generation will command a file, who will keep order when spears lower and the world narrows to a few feet of dust and blood. You're expected to speak less, but with more weight, to correct younger men sharply, to keep secrets. You may be sent on border patrols into rough hills where Argive raiders or Arcadian shepherds blur into the same threat. Nights on watch teach you patience. You learn to measure shadows, to count stars as hours, to hear the difference between goat hooves and human feet. You begin to understand why the state raised you this way. Softness would break under this burden. Fear would rot the line. A man raised with pity at every bruise would never last. You are hard, lean, ruthless, and in your own mind justified. The world outside calls you brutal. You call yourself prepared. And still, late at night, when you steal back from your bride's bed or lie awake after a drill that left your ribs aching, you sometimes wonder what life might be in a city where music is not only for marching, where questions are answered with more than a nod. You bury the thought quickly. Doubt is the only thing Sparta does not train for. At 30, you step across a line no drill could mark, and suddenly the city changes its pronouns when it speaks to you. You are no longer a half-made instrument in the hands of elders. You are homoios, an equal to the other men who have endured the same furnace, equal in rights, equal in blame. The state loosens one knot and tightens three others. You may live openly with your wife now, enter your own doorway without stealth, see your child by daylight instead of by chance. You keep your place at the mess because a Spartan without a table is an omen, but you can sit in your own courtyard afterward and watch smoke rise as if it meant more than dinner. The comfort arrives draped in obligation. Freedom here is spelled duty. The assembly, the appeller, opens to you with its rough democracy. It is not Athens with clever tongues and votes counted grain by grain. It is a mass of men who shout assent or dissent, and the magistrates judge which side thundered louder. You stand among them with hair grown long and combed, cloak red and heavy on your shoulders, and you listen as kings and elders put questions to the people. War or treaty, land grant or law. You do not make speeches. Sparta distrusts men who love their own voices. You nod or shake your head, you roar when needed. When the Gerousia, the council of elders, and the ephors, those 5 watchful magistrates, decide against your noise, you swallow it. Your equality has edges, and you learn their sharpness quickly. Your house becomes a place at last, but not a refuge. The city has left little room in you for softness, and your wife does not expect it. She's not a silent piece of furniture, she is a citizen's partner, the manager of land you were too busy to touch, the mother of children who will be judged by other men before you have time to teach them much yourself. She looks you in the face and praises or mocks you with the same clear voice she used when you were a boy in chorus. She runs faster than many men, throws a discus in festival, tells you when your hair is not oiled properly for the line. You respect her because she speaks Sparta's language without needing permission. Affection grows as familiarity, pruned by scarcity. Nights are fewer in the barracks, more at home, but the mess owns your evenings. The house owns dawns. Work, in the sense other Greeks mean it, remains beneath you. You do not farm, helots farm for you. You do not hammer iron. Perioikoi, the dwellers around, free but not full citizens, craft and trade. The city taught you shame at the thought of earning with your hands what you owe with your shield. In softer places, this would produce arrogance. Here, it produces dependence you refuse to name. You walk your land on inspection days, counting barley, measuring wine, deciding when to demand more from the men who bend in your fields. You are told the helot is half man. You act as if he is a weapon pointed at your back if you ever turn. Xenelasia, the driving out of foreigners, keeps new ideas from fermenting. The annual ritual of declaring war on helots keeps your conscience from biting. You call this stability. Others would call it terror regularized. Campaigns become your real work. When the summons comes, you pack quickly because there are few luxuries to pack. The phalanx is not theatre to you anymore. It is the string the city plays when it wants a certain sound. You oil your hair as law requires, not because vanity matters, but because ritual steadies hands. You march to the flute because rhythm keeps lines from fraying. The long spear, doru, rests in your calloused palm, and the aspis, the great round shield, bites your forearm with familiar weight. You do not think of Homer when you march. Homer is for men who fight alone. Your god is geometry, depth 8, perhaps 12, if the enemy is stouter than usual. Frontage adjusted to terrain, files and ranks like loom threads. You keep your eyes on the crest of the man before you and on the edge of his shield that shelters your right side. Your courage is measured in inches. The inch your shield overlaps his, the inch you refuse to give when dust and fear press. In battle, you learn the parts of yourself the agog could not reach. The first shove, othismos, is a weight that feels like an argument with earth. The second is a tearing apart of breath. Your spear breaks. You draw the short sword, not to carve, but to stab in the narrow gap where a thigh is not covered. You hear nothing until you hear everything at once. The flute wailing, the shriek of a horse, the crack of a shield rim on teeth. Someone falls. You step forward. Someone else takes his place in your mind later when you finally sleep. The ephors say, no Spartan asks how many. He asks where they are. You have asked both and found the answer in dust. When the enemy breaks and your line pursues only so far as law permits, you feel pride like a burn and squash it because the mess will laugh if you bring it to table. Between campaigns, you train younger men. You remember the Iren who made you run into rivers and steal your jaw under the lash. You do not admire all his methods, but you repeat most of them. You correct a boy's grip on a spear, slap a too long answer out of his mouth, make him steal from your own kitchen and then thrash him for clumsiness because this teaches him to live and keeps your household honest. You watch for the ones who smile at pain not from courage but from madness. You steer them to exercises that ask for control rather than displays. Sparta loves restraint as much as boldness, and your duty is to grow it in soil that has seen too much punishment and too little praise. You begin to take your place in rituals that once bewildered you. At Artemis Orthia, the whips whistle, and your back stings with sympathy more than fear. At the Gymnopedia, you dance with men your age, naked under the sun, songs praising those at Thermopylae while boys gape and mimic the angle of your elbow. At funerals, you stand silent. Only king's death warrants public grief, so when a friend dies hard, you carry your tears home and pour them into a cup no one will see. You learn to speak at the mess without wasting breath. Your jokes are knives. Your praise is a ration. You are watched as you once watched. Money remains a concept you treat like a foreigner. Iron spits serve as token currency. Silver is taboo. You wear poverty like armor because it keeps greed at bay. You only half believe this. You envy, sometimes, the markets of Argos or Corinth, the easy laughter of men who can buy wine without first buying permission from elders long dead and laws older than sense. Then you watch your line drill and see how much noise other cities make even when they're quiet, and you are content again. Sparta's wealth is silence and fear carefully directed, and you are rich in both. Politics tightens around you as age advances. The Epha's eyes feel heavier. The Gerusia's benches begin to look like altars you might approach one day if your knees hold and your tongue stays short. You learn the city's brittle balances, between kings who are cousins and rivals, between elders who praise caution and young men who praise speed, between messes that tell each other stories of past slights. You vote to support allies in the Peloponnese against Athens not because you hate drama, but because you distrust anyone who loves it more than law. When the long war comes and endures like a winter that will not leave the hills, you learn patience that no drill taught. You see allies fall away in return. You march under a dozen commanders. You eat barley in a dozen border forts. The line does not break. This is your whole pride. At home, you grow used to sleeping on a bed that is no longer forbidden. Children climb on you as if you were a new kind of furniture, and you pretend not to like it because men who drill boys do not coo. Your wife rules the household with a hand that reminds you of an Irene's. You do not mind. She brings in barley, distributes wine, watches helots with eyes you fear would frighten you if you were one. You speak together sometimes of men you both admire and of sons who must be made to resemble them. Sparta's love stories are about likeness. Punishments do not stop at 30. Cowards, tremblers are marked, forced to wear patched cloaks and shaved beards, shamed from messes, mocked by women and boys alike. You witness one such man stand in the market as his mother refuses him a seat. You do not pity him. Pity here is a luxury you were never taught. You merely feel the city's lesson harden in you. Better the spear in your belly than a red cloak over a trembling back. Shame continues to oil Sparta's joints more efficiently than any law. Your world is small by design. Eurota's river, Taigeta's ridge, a crown of allies, a web of fields worked by unfree hands. You know sailors and merchants exist, that poets in other cities sing for coin, that philosophers argue about forms, but you also know why your city barred the gates against such traffic. Sparta fears corruption like a man fears fire in a dry summer. You carry that fear as a virtue because it has kept the line steady for longer than any of you have been alive. You measure time now by scars and hair. Your long locks, once vanity carefully schooled into dignity, begin to streak with white. Boys you whipped nod to you in the square. Kings you once watched from the back of the assembly now gesture for you to stand closer. You have become the wall you were trained to be. When you sleep, you dream not of speeches you gave, but of the sound of shields striking shields, of the flute's high thread in a dust storm, of a girl's voice singing mockery that tasted like praise. You do not call yourself a hero, you call yourself a Spartan, and in your city, in your time, there is no higher title you can imagine. By 40, you are no longer the boy lashed at Artemis Orthia, no longer the young man skulking into your bride's chamber by night, no longer the recruit learning how to steal cheese without squealing. You are a full citizen whose body has been hardened by campaigns, whose voice now carries weight in the mess, and whose eyes have grown used to measuring younger men. Sparta does not let you rest. Your scars may itch in winter, your knees may grind on cold mornings, but your city still expects you to be both soldier and teacher. The younger ones watch you. In drill they glance to your shield arm. In the mess they wait for your laughter to see whether a joke landed. In festivals they mimic the tilt of your head. You find yourself repeating the same phrases once thrown at you. Keep your answers short, eat what is put before you, march without complaint. You pass on tricks as if they were heirlooms. How to wrap the red cloak so it does not slip in rain, how to oil hair so it shines under the sun, how to bite bread while keeping step in a line. You understand now why your elders seemed cold. affection in Sparta is measured in instruction, and the only tenderness allowed is competence. The mess remains your anchor. Meals are still the same: black broth steaming in bowls, bread torn by calloused hands, wine watered down and doled with discipline. What has changed is your place at the table. You are listened to. You correct without hesitation, and if a younger man sulks, the rest of the mess smirks him into obedience. Your life has always belonged more to this table than to your own hearth, and you do not resent it. A Spartan without his mess is still a ghost. At 40, you know better than to haunt your own life. War has not left you. The Peloponnesian conflict drags on like a winter that refuses to end. You march to Arcadia, to Messenia, to the Isthmus. You fight men who speak your tongue but cheer for different cities. You stand in lines against Athenians who sing songs about freedom, and you press your shield against their clever democracy until their wit shatters on your discipline. You learn that war is less about glory than endurance, keeping ranks steady in dust, keeping morale high when supplies rot, keeping men from quarrelling in camps where boredom can kill faster than arrows. You fight fewer pitched battles than stories will later claim, but every campaign etches patience into your bones. Your children are nearly grown. A son disappears into the Agoge at 7, and though you ache to follow him, you know you cannot. He belongs to the city now, as you once did, and you allow yourself only brief looks during festivals when boys run races or sing choruses. A daughter runs boldly across the yard, her limbs strong, her voice sharper than her brother's. She will inherit your land in practice more than he will, because you will always be away. You respect her spirit, though you joke it away in front of others. In Sparta, women's tongues are sharper than men admit, and you secretly hope she will shame her brothers into courage. The helots remain beneath everything. Their fields fatten your mess contributions. Their backs bend so that yours can carry spear and shield. You patrol sometimes, walking the lines of barley they harvest, listening for whispers. The annual declaration of war on them still feels like ritual murder, but you no longer question it. Fear is a crop, and you cultivate it as carefully as they cultivate grain. You know what happens to cities that let their slaves forget chains. You will not be the one who lets memory soften. Your body begins to protest. Cold mornings bite, wounds ache, eyes strain. But Sparta expects no indulgence. You still march, though you walk with more deliberation. You still fight, though you stab more cautiously. In festival dances, your steps lag, and younger men smirk the way you once did. You smirk back harder because you know they will stand where you are soon enough. At funerals, you stand straighter than your back allows. To limp in public is to feed whispers, and whispers are the beginning of shame. Better pain than dishonor. By 50, you will be eligible for the Gerousia, the Council of Elders. You already feel its shadow. You speak less, not more. You watch how disputes are settled, how ephors balance law and expedience, how kings compete while pretending to share. You know that if you live long enough and your reputation holds, you may sit among those who rule for life. That knowledge makes you more cautious. You mock less, you consider more, and when you do speak, you choose words that can echo longer than the clash of spears. The festivals taste different now. When boys are flogged at Artemis Orthia, you remember your own back and feel sympathy you will not admit. When the gymnopedia comes and men strip to dance, your body is no longer agile, but you stand proud because you still stand. You watch mothers praising bravery and shaming cowardice, and you recognize the truth in their voices. You find yourself repeating their words to younger men, as if mothers and veterans were reciting the same script. In private moments you wonder. You hear of Athens with its plays and debates, of Corinth with its wealth, of distant lands where men wash more, sing differently, write poems for love instead of war. For a heartbeat you imagine living there, but the thought curdles quickly. You were made here, and you belong to this rhythm. Drill, march, mess, assembly, festival. You may envy softness for a moment, but softness disgusts you in the same breath. You laugh at yourself, shake your head, and oil your hair for the next drill. You are a Spartan still, and until your knees fail completely, the line will always find you. At 50, the city looks at you differently. Your shoulders slope, your step has slowed, but your voice has gained weight. Now you are eligible for the Gerousia, the council of elders that rules alongside kings and ephors. It is an honor rarer than gold. Only 28 men sit there, chosen for life. If you are fortunate, if your record in battle is clean and your tongue has never betrayed cowardice, your peers will elect you. From that day on, you will speak less often, but with greater consequence, for your word helps decide war and peace, law and punishment. Even before election, age makes you a figure. Younger men measure themselves against you. Boys in the Agoj point and whisper, "That one fought at Mantinea," or "He marched the long campaign." You train them with glances as much as with words. You correct their stance, cuff their ears for answers too long, remind them that a Spartan's tongue should be sharper than his spear and shorter than both. You no longer lead charges, but your presence at the front is still demanded, because courage wears grey hair as well as bronze. Life in the mess continues, but its flavour shifts. You still drink the black broth, but more slowly. You still laugh, but with the deep amusement of one who has seen every joke before. You talk more of the past, less of the future. Yet the mess is your heartbeat. Without it, you would fade. A Spartan cut off from his table is no citizen. At 50, you feel this truth most keenly. At home, your wife governs with more authority than ever. She has managed land, helots, and children while you fought, and she reminds you, sometimes without words, that Sparta's strength is not only shields, but also those who keep fields alive. Your daughters speak boldly. Your sons stand stiff in lines you once stood in. You watch them with pride, but also severity. Failure would shame not only them, but you. The rituals of your youth now look different. When boys are flogged at Artemis Orthia, you feel pity in your bones even as you cheer. When you watch the naked dances at Gymnopedia, your own steps ache in memory. You are reminded that Sparta shapes men not only for battle, but also for endurance. Endurance is your truest companion now. The helots remain the shadow beneath all. You still patrol their villages, but now you see more clearly that the system is fragile. Fear upon fear, violence upon violence. You justify it as your fathers did, but part of you wonders what would happen if the helots ever found courage equal to numbers. You push the thought aside because Sparta does not train men for doubt. The Gerousia, when you attend, feels like the end of a long corridor. You sit among men as scarred and silent as yourself. Kings argue, ephors scowl, you deliberate. You know that your decisions will shape the city more than your spear ever did. You vote to preserve the old ways because the old ways preserved you. You believe in them, even as you glimpse cracks. Sparta is a wall, you tell yourself, and walls endure when stones do not question the mortar. At 50, you are less body than memory, but memory is power. Young men march because old men remember. They know you will tell their stories or judge them. You walk slower, but you still walk with the line, and that is enough. You are a Spartan still. Old age in Sparta is not retreat, but another campaign. Past 60, your back bends and your stride shortens, yet the city still keeps you at its heart. The Gerontes, elders, are few, and every wrinkle is a badge of survival in a place that thinned most men long before grey hair. You walk slower, but when you enter the assembly, the younger ones stand straighter. Your body has become evidence that discipline and endurance can outlast decades of war. Your duties shift from spear to voice. You no longer carry a shield into the press, but you carry memory into the council. You speak less often than you think, because words in Sparta are rationed like grain. When you do speak, men listen. You remind them of winters when supply lines failed, of Helot uprisings crushed, of treaties signed and broken. Your counsel is not philosophy, it is experience sharpened into proverbs. Hold the line becomes more than a tactic. It becomes a way of life, a law of survival passed down like a cloak. Life at home is quieter, but not soft. Your wife has ruled the household for decades, and now she rules you too, with the blunt honesty only a Spartan woman would dare. She tells you when to rest, when to eat less, when to scold the grandchildren. She has carried Sparta in her own way, birthing and burying with the same steady face. You honor her by listening, because you know that half the city's strength has always been in women who were never hidden. The mess still claims you, though you eat less. Younger men help you to your place, pour wine for you, wait for you to nod before they laugh. You feel both pride and melancholy. Pride because you shaped them, melancholy because you know they will soon shape others in turn. The songs they sing are the same you once chanted, the rhythm of feet on earth, the same drumbeat that carried you through battles. Continuity is Sparta's truest wealth. Death here is not hidden. When a king dies, women wail in public, beat their breasts, tear their hair. When a common Spartan dies, grief is quieter, but no less weighty. If you die well, shield intact, reputation unstained, your name is spoken in the mess, in the songs at festivals, in the whispers of boys training by the river. If you die badly, coward, trembler, your name rots before your body. This knowledge sits beside every Spartan like a shadow, from birth to last breath. You feel the years, the stiffness of joints, the ache in wounds long scarred, but you also feel the satisfaction of survival. You have marched through hunger, flogging, stealth raids, long wars. You have carried shame when commanded and set it down when honor allowed. You have seen sons go into the agoj, daughters shame cowards, wives mock men into courage. You have lived the life Sparta demanded, harsh, disciplined, stripped of softness, but heavy with meaning. When you imagine your end, you do not picture luxury. You picture a cloak wrapped around you, hair combed and oiled, sons and comrades standing silent. You picture your shield either carried back with you or beneath you. You picture your name murmured in the mess as boys chew black broth and dream of battles they do not yet understand. That is immortality here, the only kind Sparta promises. You are a Spartan, from the cold river reeds of your childhood to the council bench of your old age. Others will call your life cruel. You call it necessary, you call it enough. Moving on to our next story, we'll explore a single day in the life of a Chinese peasant. To most, each day often feels like it may be their last. Before the roosters finish their argument with the dark, you are awake. The clay brazier has gone to ash. Your breath smokes in the room. The reed mat remembers your bones. You grope for the flint, coax a spark into the old tinder, and the kitchen answers with a thin orange that licks the pot. Your wife is already up. She is always up before fire, and she moves with the economy of someone who has walked this floor since she was a child. Water from the jar, millet from the bamboo basket, a pinch of salt, 2 strips of dried radish. The porridge will be thin because the tax granary took its mouthful last moon, but there will be enough for the hour when the eastern ridge turns from ink to charcoal. You ladle out 2 bowls, nod to the paper above the stove where soot has turned the kitchen god a deeper black, and murmur the line your father taught you. Report our household kindly. Outside, the yard is a map of the year. The plough waits under its mat of straw, iron share dull with the last field's dust. The yoke leans where the boys left it yesterday. The shoulder pole hangs by the door. The baskets under it smell of chaff and cabbages tucked there to keep frost honest. In the corner, the jar where you ferment soybean paste burps quietly, a domestic beast that must be fed with salt and patience. Against the wall stand the bamboo rakes, the hoe, a winnowing fan mended twice, the sickle whose curve has learned your palm. You own all this and none of it, because every tool belongs as much to seasons as to names. When you die, your sons will pick them up and find that the handles have taken their ghosts. You step out through the gate into a lane beaten smooth by decades of sandals and shoulder poles. The village has no walls. The ring of willows beside the pond is defense enough against wind. The well at the crosspath is a gossiping mouth even this early. Two girls from the west end lower buckets and swap news between creaks of rope. You nod without words. The fields wait, and the ox snorts, steam into the half-light when you loosen his rope. He knows the direction by habit. You know it by ledger. North China's soil is a generous mother and a suspicious aunt. It feeds well when courted with water at the right times and angered by floods when the river forgets its banks. You walk the path between stubble and ridge, the earth still numb from night, and stop by the tiny altar of packed clay at the field's edge. The lads in town say the court in Yemen is the only judge that matters. You know this tiny mound has decided more harvests than magistrates. You set 3 grains of millet on the mud, bow with the short, practiced movement your father used, and speak to the soil god as if to a neighbour. Let the ox step true, let the share cut straight, let the sky behave. No one hears you but the larks, and they keep their own counsel. You hitch the yoke, fit the plough into the earth, and lean. The first furrow is always a negotiation between sleep and sun. The iron lip bites, the clod split with a sound that satisfies in the gut, and your feet find the old dance of pressure and release. When the plough bucks, you lift. When it digs, you press. The ox thinks in straight lines. You think in debts. Rent to the great house that owns the far paddies. Grain owed to the state granary when the magistrate's runners come with tally sticks and bamboo slips. Labour days owed when the road is mended or the dike repaired. The earth beneath you is thick with obligations, and every furrow you turn is a promise to meet them. You work north-south first, then east-west, because your father said wind has its own grain in the soil. Your eldest boy runs ahead at the end of the row to stamp the turn and laughs when the ox splashes him with a clod. He is 8, and the state has already written his name on a register in the Yarman 2 towns away. The bamboo slips with your household strokes bundled with hundreds more, a forest of obligations. In your pocket is your own tally, a split bamboo with notches you cut each time you deliver a basket to the village headman for the tax cart. The halves will be matched at year's end. The wood will not lie for either of you. When the sun has found its place a handspan above the ridge, you stop and drink. Water from the gourd is always an argument with thirst, because you carry enough to make the hours tolerable and never enough to spoil you. Your wife has wrapped 2 cakes of steamed millet and wheat in a cloth and tucked a scallion beside them, and you eat them with that combination of gratitude and monotony that makes every noon meal taste like virtue. If it were a market day, one of the 5-day markets that pull neighbours from a dozen villages, you might be sitting under a mat canopy in the square, slurping hot noodles from a peddler's pot and listening to a storyteller exaggerate the length of a general's spear. Today is not that day. Today is field day, and the only stories you listen to are those told by crows and the plough. Work continues in units older than hours, a field width, a furrow, a turn. The ox breathes like a bellows. Your shoulders burn in the old groove. You pause once to fix the cotter peg with a twig whittled to fit, and once to pick up a beetle that your youngest insists is a god because it carries the world. Your wife and daughter appear as the sun tilts, she with a basket of cabbage and tofu, heaped rice with bits of pork that cost 3 days of savings and a morning of haggling, the girl with a bundle of hemp fibres to twist into cord as she walks. Men plough, women weave is a saying, not a sentence. You have seen your wife lift the ploughshare when you were sick, and your daughter scare sparrows from the millet, her braids bouncing like banner tassels. At midday, as you chew and squint, the village headman's nephew passes by on the path with a bamboo strip tucked behind his ear and a brush case in his belt. He will one day sit by the Yarman gate and take petitions, if his uncle's patronage holds and the teacher in the next town does not die. He nods to you and remarks, with the breezy wisdom of someone who owns no ox, that the county magistrate has ordered an inspection of dikes after last spring's breach. You nod back because the dikes are your wall, and the river is your enemy when it forgets its banks. You will be called, along with every other man on the register, to carry baskets of clay and stamp the earth until it is hard as history. You do not resent this. You resent only that the tax grain never shrank when the flood took half the village's millet. The granary is a stone belly. It does not know pity. News trickles across fields like water. A travelling monk last week chanted sutras by the shrine of the earth god in exchange for millet and oil, and sold paper charms printed from carved blocks. Your wife bought one for the lintel, black ink gods spitting demons out of their mouths, and now the doorframe looks braver. The old Taoist at the East End brewed a bitter tea for your neighbour's cough. The boy still coughed, but he slept, and that is enough. You do not think in doctrines, you think in efficacy. The kitchen god sees, the earth god steadies, the ancestors in the wooden niche above the table require rice and incense on the 1st and 15th, and the magistrate requires the same things in larger amounts and coarser words. When the furrows are done for this field, you lift the plough into the cart and lead the ox home. The sun is a yellow coin tilted halfway into the bowl of the hills. The lane is busier now. Women with bundles of firewood, like hats of twigs. Boys with eels wriggling in buckets fished from the canal. An old man with a stool and a bag of tools moving toward the neighbour's gate because hinges have histories and need old men. You hear laughter from the compound by the large locust tree. Someone's third son is getting betrothed, and the wine jar has already been unsealed. You stop, raise your sleeve, and let 3 mouthfuls remind you that rice can be liquid. Generosity irrigates a village. Back in your yard, you unyoke the ox and rub his neck where the wood bit. He is a dull companion, and you are a slower one, and you are comfortable together. Your wife moves in and out, her shuttle on the loom clacking in a rhythm older than harvest. She is weaving hemp this week because hemp forgives clumsy hands and takes dye with a patience silk would never extend. Silk is for tax levies and landlords' wives. Hemp is for people who feel rain. She stops long enough to ladle water into the trough for the chickens and to scold your youngest for climbing the wall to steal apricots from the neighbour. You do not laugh yet. Later, when the boy sleeps, you will share the apricot and the laughter both, because rules are for daylight. Evening is when the village becomes a conversation instead of a machine. You carry a bowl of millet-ale to the gate and sit on the stool that your father sat on. The neighbour on your left brings his, and the neighbour on your right brings his gossip. Someone saw a county runner on the road. Did he carry a tally stick or a cane? If a cane, someone owes Labour Days. If a tally stick, someone owes grain. The headman's nephew repeats his news about the dikes, dressing it now with details you suspect he invented. The old man with the hinge tools offers to fix your door, not because it needs fixing, but because he needs to be needed. The girls of the North Lane have hung their laundry and their laughter on the same rope, and they pretend not to see the boys, pretending not to see them. The smell of frying leeks drifts from 3 courtyards at once, and the village cat, who belongs to the whole lane and no one, makes her rounds like an inspector. You bow later to the tablets on the wall, 3 generations carved with strokes that your father's father traced with a blunt brush. You place 2 grains in the bowl and light the incense, and the smoke curls up like the tales of characters the boys are practicing in the schoolroom by the shrine. You do not read more than your own name and the numbers that appear on a tally. You do not need more than that to meet your debts and feed your sons. The magistrate's clerk can keep the rest of the bamboo slips on his own shelf. Night comes without lamps for most. You bank the brazier, eat the last ladle of porridge, drink the last swallow of ale, and count your tools in your head while your wife counts her warp threads. The ox shifts in his stall and sighs. The child in the next room mutters in his sleep. A cricket in the yard argues with the moon. You lay down on the heated brick bed if you are lucky enough to have one. Your grandfather's hands mortared it when the harvest was fat, or on a mat if you are not, and you stretch your legs and feel the day in them. Tomorrow, the well, the plough, the tax, the gossip, the incense smoke will be the same. You do not call it monotony. You call it a life threaded to the loom of heaven's calendar. New moon and full, planting and harvest, rice ripening in paddies 2 counties south, wheat heads fattening in your own field, the river's temper measured by mud on the doorstep. In the cities, men argue in courtyards about policy, whether salt and iron should belong to the state or to merchants, whether the equal field law will be enforced in the next reign, whether coin will be copper or trust will be grain. In your lane, men argue about whose turn it is to patch the path and whether the headman's scales cheat. This is your politics, and you practice it with the seriousness of a philosopher, though you do not call yourself that. You tell your son, before sleep takes both of you, that heaven is high, but the magistrate is near, that crops obey weather but also hands, that a man's face is washed every morning, and his name every season, by the way he pays and speaks. He will forget in the morning and remember in 20 years. You sleep. The kitchen god watches from his soot, the earth god from his clay, the ancestors from their wood, and the magistrate from his chair in the Yarman miles away. The ox dreams of nothing. The river mutters to itself and does not yet plan to leave its banks. If it does, the village will raise its shoulders and stamp the dike with 1,000 feet until the earth remembers its duty. You will be among them. That is the day, and tomorrow is its mirror. The rooster announces dawn again. Though you have not really slept, your body knows the rhythm of labor better than clocks. Today is not for ploughing, but for the countless small tasks that keep a household from unraveling. A farm is not only furrows, it is walls to mend, tools to sharpen, animals to feed, cloth to weave, taxes to anticipate. The city people imagine peasants are beasts tied to soil, but you are a juggler, balancing every part of survival at once. First comes fire. Ash from yesterday's brazier is scooped and scattered in the yard to dry damp earth. Twigs are gathered, tinder coaxed, and a small flame licks the pot before the sky has turned from grey to blue. Breakfast is the same porridge of millet and vegetables, sometimes thinned with cabbage broth, sometimes flavoured with a pinch of salt you bartered for at market. It is never enough to fill the belly, but enough to start the day. Children eat quickly, then scatter. Boys to chase sparrows from fields, girls to help spin hemp or carry water. The ox snorts impatiently, even though he will not be yoked today. You check his hooves anyway, rub his flank, and sprinkle a handful of bran if you can spare it. A sick ox is more dangerous than a flood. Chickens cluck around the yard, scratching through straw for insects. Their eggs are counted as carefully as coins, a few for food, most to be traded. Pigs root in a pen built of reeds and mud, their bodies already fat with autumn's refuse. They are your stored wealth, moving and grunting, ready for the new year when sacrifices must be made. Tools need attention. You take the iron ploughshare and whetstone, grinding patiently until the edge shines. The hoe gets a new handle, the sickle is bound tighter with hemp cord. Nothing may break in the field, for time is too precious to waste. Your wife mends baskets, twisting bamboo strips, humming under her breath. She counts warp and weft on the loom, feet pumping, hands guiding threads into cloth that will clothe the family and pay dues. Every creak of the loom is a heartbeat of the household. Around midday, you walk to the village headman's house. He has summoned households to prepare for corvée labour. Next week, the dike must be repaired. Each family owes days of work. You nod, accept the tally mark scratched on a bamboo strip, and know that the days you spend stamping clay on the riverbank will leave your own field wanting. Complaints are useless. The headman answers to the magistrate, and the magistrate to a governor, and the governor to Heaven's Son himself. Heaven may be high, but the whip of tax runners is near. On the way home you stop by the shrine at the crossroad. Incense ash piles high before the earth god's image, and scraps of paper prayers cling to the altar like leaves. You light a stick, bow twice, and whisper the names of your family. The ritual is simple, but it stitches your day to the unseen order of things. Ancestors are remembered that night too. You place bowls of rice before the wooden tablets, pour a ladle of millet ale, and feel the silence fill with company. Evening is market talk. Neighbours gather by the well, voices weaving as threads of hemp. One man complains that his ox grew lame, another boasts of a fat cabbage harvest. Someone whispers that bandits were seen on the road to the prefecture. Another insists they were only travelling monks. Stories swell like rivers, carrying truth and rumour together. You listen, laugh at the right moments, and walk home under a sky patterned with stars. Before sleep, you check the tally sticks again, running your thumb over the notches. Grain owed, days owed, debt stacked higher than any roof beam. Tomorrow will bring more porridge, more earth, more labour. You sigh, pull your cloak tighter, and lie down beside the steady breathing of your wife and children. Life is repetition, but repetition is survival, and survival, in your world, is enough. Spring comes with damp soil sticking to your sandals and the smell of thawed earth rising like steam. You have waited through the long cold when food shrank, firewood vanished, and your belly knotted with hunger. Now the world exhales, and every man, woman, and child in the village exhales with it. Seeds must go into the ground before heaven changes its mind. The ploughshare is polished, the ox restless, and you feel urgency like a drumbeat under your ribs. You rise before the sun, eat a hurried bowl of thin porridge, and stride to the fields with your eldest son. He carries the seed basket, scattering grains of millet, while you guide the plough through the wet earth. The soil smells sharp and new. Birds follow behind, picking what they can, and you curse them without heat. Planting is a gamble. Too early, and frost may kill the shoots. Too late, and summer heat will shrivel them. You rely on memory, on the elders' advice, and on the colour of the sky at dawn. Heaven sends no guarantees. Summer is toil without rest. Weeds grow faster than crops, so you stoop daily, pulling them with aching fingers. The canals must be watched, water channeled carefully. Too much flow drowns roots, too little bakes them to straw. You work shirtless, sweat-soaking linen trousers, back darkened by sun. Children scatter rags across rows to frighten sparrows. Women weed alongside men, hands raw from pulling. Evenings are brief relief, spent chewing cold rice cakes and sitting at the gate to catch a breeze. Mosquitoes sing, dogs bark, frogs croak from the pond. You do not complain, because to complain is to tempt heaven's wrath. Autumn is both joy and fear. The millet heads grow fat and golden, the rice in paddies turns heavy, bending stalks. Reaping is frantic work, everyone swinging sickles from dawn until dark. Bundles of grain are stacked high, tied with hemp, carried on shoulder poles. The village lanes smell of chaff and dust, the air thick with the sound of threshing flails. Your arms burn, but your heart lightens. Food is here, visible, tangible. Yet you know the first share does not belong to you. Tax collectors will arrive with their tallies, and the granary must be filled before your own baskets are. Each year you pray that what remains is enough. Each year you cut a little deeper, hide a little grain if you dare, barter a little with neighbours to stretch survival through winter. Winter is patience and hunger. The fields rest, covered with frost or thin snow. You patch walls with mud, mend tools by firelight, carve handles for hoes and sickles. Your wife weaves endlessly, the loom clacking as she turns hemp into cloth. Children chase each other around the yard, cheeks red, hands numb. Meals shrink, porridge thinned to watery gruel. Pickled vegetables, the last turnips dug from frozen soil. On festival days, you open jars of wine, share pork if a pig was slaughtered, light firecrackers to frighten away demons. The new year is celebrated with noise and laughter, but your belly remembers scarcity. Through all seasons, the same cycle repeats. Sow, weed, reap, endure. Your body changes with it. Lean in spring, scorched in summer, swollen with strength in autumn, hollowed in winter. You do not own time. Time owns you, pulling you like an ox on a rope. Yet you find comfort in its predictability. Each season carries its burdens and its gifts. You know when to expect hunger, when to expect plenty, when to prepare offerings to ancestors, when to brace for inspectors. The cycle is harsh, but it is also home. Neighbours live the same rhythm. You hear their complaints at the well. Too little rain, too many insects, too greedy magistrates. You share your own grievances, laugh, and walk away, knowing that all of you must bow to the same order. Heaven watches, the emperor decrees, the magistrate collects, the village labours. Your day and your year are not your own, but you endure, because endurance is the only kind of wealth a peasant can trust. And so one year folds into another. Seeds scatter, shoots rise, grain ripens, frost falls. You carry your pole, your baskets, your debts, and your prayers. Tomorrow will bring the same, and you will meet it, because to be a farmer in ancient China is not to choose, but to continue. Continuity is survival, and survival is enough. Your household is your fortress, though its walls are only mud and reeds. Every member of the family works. Idleness is an enemy greater than drought. At dawn, your wife rises even before you, stoking the brazier, mixing millet and water, and feeding the smallest children before they cry too loudly. She keeps the rhythm of the home as surely as you keep the rhythm of the plough. The loom is her battlefield. You hear the clack of its frame throughout the day, the steady sound of warp and weft binding hemp into cloth, cloth into shirts, shirts into the family's protection against wind and snow. Daughters sit beside her, twisting thread, learning how to spin as soon as their fingers can grasp fibres. They carry baskets of hemp stalks from the yard, soak them in water, dry them on stones. Their chatter fills the courtyard, but their hands never stop. When they are older, they will marry into other households, carrying with them the skill to clothe strangers. Until then, they keep your children warm, your debts manageable, and your dignity intact. Sons follow you to the fields, first as play, then as labour. The youngest run ahead, chasing sparrows, laughing as they wave branches. By 10, they carry buckets of water from the canal, their shoulders already learning the ache of the carrying pole. By 15, they swing sickles beside you, arms raw, backs bent, sweat soaking their shirts. They learn hunger early, because you tell them that a peasant's stomach is never full, only content for a while. They also learn pride, when grain stands tall, when baskets fill, when the family's portion is safe from rats and taxmen alike. Grandparents are teachers too. If you are lucky, your father still sits by the stove, telling stories while he carves handles for hoes or men's harness straps. He reminds children of floods long past, of magistrates stricter than today's, of ancestors who survived worse winters. His tales carry lessons hidden in humour. Never argue with the river, never forget to pay the headman, never leave the ox hungry. The children roll their eyes but listen. They will repeat his words decades later. Meals bring the family together. Bowls of porridge or rice are shared, each child waiting their turn, each adult pretending they ate more than they did, so the children believe it. Meat is rare, pork only on festival days, chicken when sickness requires strength. Pickled vegetables, dried radish, bean curd and noodles fill most bellies. Your wife seasons with ginger or garlic when she can, not for taste alone, but for health, because she believes these spices chase away illness. Whether it is truth or belief, the family eats gratefully. Festivals transform the household. At New Year, the children hang red slips of paper on the doorposts, brush written blessings copied from neighbours. Firecrackers crackle in the lane, and bowls of dumplings steam on the table, stuffed with cabbage and pork fat. Ancestors are honoured with incense and bowls of rice, the family bowing together in the courtyard. For a day or two, laughter outweighs labour. though you know the debts and duties wait just beyond the firelight. Lantern Festival brings more play. Children carve patterns into paper, hang glowing lights, and chase shadows down the lane. Their joy is short but memorable, a reminder that even peasants have space for celebration. Discipline is constant. A child who shirks weeding is scolded, sometimes struck. You cannot afford softness when every hand matters, yet affection is present, if muted. A daughter braids flowers into your wife's hair and earns a smile. A son brings you a beetle he believes divine, and you pat his head. Your world does not speak of love in words, but in acts, weaving until fingers blister, ploughing until backs ache, cooking until bellies fill. Neighbours judge your family as harshly as magistrates. A lazy child embarrasses his father, a quarrelsome wife shames her husband, a drunk man shames everyone. You work hard not only to survive, but to be seen surviving. Reputation feeds you as surely as millet does. When floods come, when roofs leak, when sickness strikes, neighbours help only families they respect. To be thought diligent is insurance. To be thought careless is starvation. Women's strength is more visible here than in city stories. Your wife does not hide in chambers. She bargains at the market, shouting louder than men, haggling for cloth, salt, or pots. She manages accounts with tally sticks, calculates what must be saved for tax, what can be spared for barter. In her hands, the family's survival is as secure as in yours. She is as much the backbone of the farm as your ox, and you know it. When night falls, the family gathers again. Grandfather coughs by the fire, children roll in blankets, your wife sets aside her spindle. You light incense for the ancestors, bow together, and listen to the silence between crickets. You feel tired, but not alone. Family is both burden and blessing, the weight on your back and the warmth at your side. Without them, the field would swallow you. With them, the world makes sense. You lie awake before dawn sometimes and wonder where your life fits in the scale of heaven. You are one man, one household, one plot of land. But every ritual you perform and every seed you plant ties you to something vaster. You are not told every detail. Philosophers in distant capitals debate the nature of Tao. Scholars memorize the analects. Monks chant sutras. But you live pieces of all these traditions stitched into your routine. Religion here is not a single temple or book. It is a net that catches you from every side, woven from family, village, empire, and sky. The ancestors are your first gods. Above the household stove, wooden tablets bear names carved in ink that fade slowly, as if reminding you that memory requires maintenance. Each new moon and full moon, you light incense before them, set bowls of rice, pour millet wine, bow 3 times. Children mimic your movements, and when they stumble, your wife guides their hands, because the ancestors must see respect in posture as well as offering. You feel their presence not as voices, but as obligations. To keep the household honest, to keep debts paid, to keep lineage alive. When a child sickens, you wonder if you failed them. When a harvest is fat, you thank them aloud, so the kitchen god hears too. The kitchen god himself is another witness. His paper image is pasted above the stove, soot-stained, half-curling from heat. Once a year, before New Year, you burn it, sending him to heaven to report on your family's conduct. You bribe him with sweet cakes, so his words will stick together in sugar and not form complaints. Then you paste a new image, fresh and stern, and start again. Every meal is eaten under his gaze. When your son drops a bowl or your daughter quarrels, you glance up at his blackened face and remember that nothing in the house is unseen. The earth god has his shrine at the crossroad, a simple mound of clay with a tile roof, a painted face behind red paper. You stop there when leaving for the fields, leave grains or fruit, bow with quick sincerity. He is close, approachable, a neighbour among gods. At festivals, the whole village gathers there, burning incense sticks until the smoke makes eyes water. Drums beat, children run with paper flags, Women lay out dishes. Offerings are divided afterward, shared as if heaven has tasted and left the rest for mortals. The earth god is your local magistrate, and you treat him with the same mixture of fear and familiarity. Festivals mark the year like furrows mark a field. At Qingming in spring, you sweep graves, burn paper money for ancestors, cry and laugh in the same breath as relatives meet. At the Mid-Autumn Festival, you eat mooncakes, gaze at the full moon, and tell children stories of Chang'e flying to the heavens. Lantern Festival brings light into the dark of winter. Dragon Boat Festival brings dragon-headed boats racing down rivers, drums echoing off water, sticky rice dumplings clutched in hands. Each holiday interrupts the grind of farming, reminding you that you are part of a culture older than memory. Buddhist monks wander through, their begging bowls outstretched, chanting sutras. You give millet or coins when you can, because generosity is a seed that may bloom in unseen fields. Aozi Taoist priests arrive during epidemics or droughts, burning talismans, chanting charms, waving swords to cut demons. You watch with skepticism and hope. Perhaps their rituals are show, but perhaps the smoke really frightens spirits. Confucian scholars speak less to peasants but shape your world all the same. Their teachings instruct magistrates, who instruct headmen, who instruct you. When you bow to elders, when you discipline children, when you scold yourself for laziness, you echo Confucius without ever reading a single character. Dreams play their part. You wake sometimes with images of ancestors visiting, or rivers breaking dikes, or fields covered with golden grain. Your wife interprets them according to tradition. A dream of teeth falling means misfortune. A dream of clear water means blessing. Dreams blur into omens. The cry of a night bird, the sudden silence of frogs, the strange growth of a gourd, all are messages. You interpret them, not with certainty, but with caution. Better to light an incense stick and bow than to ignore what might be warning. The emperor himself is a distant figure, but his shadow reaches even your lane. At New Year, officials proclaimed edicts on bamboo slips or silk banners hung in markets, announcing that heaven blesses the Son of Heaven and that subjects must obey. You may never see the capital, never tread the stones of palaces, but you know the emperor's virtue is said to ripple outward, keeping seasons in balance. If drought comes, you hear rumors that he fasts and prays. If floods come, you hear he offers sacrifices at altars. You do not know if it is true. You only know that taxes arrive without fail, and so you assume heaven must still listen to him. Life feels small, yet it is stitched into the empire's great robe. Your millet feeds granaries that feed soldiers on frontiers. Your cloth covers bodies in towns you will never visit. Your taxes fund roads where strangers travel, officials ride, armies march. You are a thread in a tapestry too vast to see, but you feel its tug in every tally stick, every corvée summons. When you burn incense, you imagine ancestors watching. When you bow, you imagine heaven noting. When you pay taxes, you imagine the emperor nodding in a hall filled with jade and gold. These imaginations sustain you, even when hunger bites. Old age approaches slowly. Your hair thins, your back stoops, your sons now lead the ox while you supervise. You tell stories by the brazier, of floods endured, of winters survived, of ancestors' patience. Grandchildren giggle at your voice, mimic your walk, run errands with pride when you praise them. You know your life will not be carved in bamboo slips or recorded in chronicles. You will live on in memory, in tablets above the stove, in rituals of incense and rice. That is enough. At night you sit by the gate, cup of millet ale in hand, and look at the stars. They feel close, yet unreachable. You know that scholars in the capital map them, naming constellations, tying them to omens. You only know them as companions that return, marking time as surely as crops do. You sip, sigh, and feel content. You are a farmer, a peasant, a servant of earth and heaven both. Your day was toil, your year a cycle, your life a thread. You belong to ancestors behind you, to children before you, to heaven above you, and to the soil beneath you. That belonging is your only wealth, your only immortality. Tomorrow the rooster will crow again, and you will rise.